evening. You're going to be hearing from an author very shortly. But first, we're going to talk about bees, because did you know today is World Bee Day? So I'll also ask, did you know that bees take on 7 different jobs during their short lives, and that they only fly to gather nectar during the last few days of their lives? So be nice to them. Or that male bees can't feed themselves and are starved to death by the female bees at the end of their life. What? That's grim. Well, Philip Atkinson, that's so grim. Is a coach, author, and beekeeper, and he's buzzing with strange and surprising facts from inside the hive. He's the author of Bee Wise, a book which shares leadership lessons inspired the world of bees. More about that in a little bit, though. Philip, what can we learn from bees?
Thank you, Arun. You've had some good facts there already. We can learn so much from bees. You know, they are a very complicated organism, much like where we work in our offices today. And we can learn about communication, we can learn about decision making, we can learn about not working as hard as bees as well. So there are lots of lessons we can talk about.
Right, I need to go back to one of those things, that the male bees can't feed themselves and are starved to death by the female bees at the end of their lives. Can you just elaborate on this and how this happens and why?
Yes, thank you, Arun. It is super fascinating. Inside a busy beehive, there's one queen. There could be 30,000 hard-working female worker bees, and there might only be a few thousand male bees. Now, the male bees, you're right, they can't feed themselves. They rely entirely on the females to be fed, and the only job they do is to reproduce. And when they're no longer necessary, at the end of the summer, the beginning of autumn, they're a drain on resources. They are useless, and the female worker bees stop feeding them and starve them to death. Oh. Now, in the book, this is a light-hearted way of saying, make sure you're useful at work. Keep learning skills, keep training, keep developing, keep practicing for new skills to make sure that you are always useful to an organization.
Massively. And then AI comes along, hey, and then that changes. So you've always got to do that anyway to make sure you're going to keep your job at some point.
It's a great lesson, yeah.
Bees. I feel that bees have had a bit of a resurgence in that, if I go back to my childhood and I think about life in the 90s, wasps were a pain in that, and a lot of people didn't really maybe didn't have the education or the facts about wasps and bees. So instead, just looked at all wasps and bees and just went, oh, get them away from me. Whereas now we're encouraged to do, we know the value of bees. And with that, things like wildflower meadows in your back garden and stuff, there's a lot more work people do to try and give the bees the best habitat they can.
Exactly. And so we should, because 80% of our food crops are pollinated by bees, and only by bees. So if the bees die, we're stuck. In fact, in China, they're actually trying to make tiny mechanical drones that can replace bees if necessary. Now, let's hope we never get to that point.
How many different types of bees are there?
There's 434 species in mainland Europe.
Oh, wow.
Only two genus of bees live in colonies and make honey, as we know. And they're called Apis mellifera, and it's those bees that the wildflower meadows are so important for, and we all need to look after them.
Do bees sting?
Yes.
Okay. Why would they sting us?
Well, as a beekeeper, they only ever sting me due to user error. It's my fault. It's feedback. If I do something wrong, it's feedback and I get stung. Bees don't want to sting us. Bees have no interest in stinging us because as soon as they do, they die. So actually, bees are not scary. We shouldn't swat them away. We should just marvel at how they work and what they do.
What's the difference between a bee and a wasp?
Well, they are different. Bees, actually, a wasp sting is more aggressive. Wasps actually also pollinate. You know, wasps are important for the environment. There's a quick fact about wasps. Actually, wasps they're not attracted to sugar, they're attracted to protein. So if you're having a barbecue, it's the sausage they're after. And really, like bees, just leave them alone. They will soon go away. It's fine.
So if they're attracted to the protein and not the sugar, is it not worth reviving a bee with a teaspoon of sugar water?
No. So when a bee is tired, because, you know, they fly hundreds of miles to make honey for us if we take the honey. They are tired and often they need to rest. So they might rest on your picnic table and they rest and they get energy from the sun. Just leave them in peace. Or if they're really tired, actually, you're right, a teaspoonful with a little bit of sugar and a little bit of water, is just what they need to get them back to their hive.
Why did you want to be a beekeeper?
It's an amazing subject. My great uncle Jack was a beekeeper, and everyone has a bee story. And I was fascinated by how honey got into a jar. And then when I started working life, I realized the metaphor and the parallels between a busy, complicated beehive and a busy, complicated working office. And that's my business now.
What was it about the office and the bee life comparison that fascinated you?
Well, first of all, I was sitting outside my office block on a hot summer's day, and it was lunchtime, and it was hot and sunny, and people were coming and going through a small door, and everyone was chatting, and people were bringing things into the office: briefcases, ideas, research, experience. And then inside the office, it was noisy, it was complicated. You couldn't see what was happening, and I just suddenly realised, oh my goodness. There is a great parallel between a beehive and working life. And I just started using that metaphor in meetings. And it was a way of introducing difficult conversations that need to be had. And it's been a lot of fun ever since.
Do you prefer working with people or bees?
My job is working with people. My hobby is working with bees. They are both complicated and fascinating. And we have a lot to learn from both.
I like this, and it's interesting about some like the stress topics in the world of bees. So why being busy isn't a badge of honor, as we've just spoken about. From hive to thrive. Tell us about this. I've seen this.
Hive to thrive. Well, really, it's let's stop and pause and think about the bees, and then let's stop and pause and think about how we show up in the world. We're all company bosses or leaders or employees, or we're brothers or sisters or family members, or we're community members. And let's think a little bit harder about what is happening where we are showing up. And let's think about diversity or decision making or how we are as role models. It's really important.
What should we do if we discover a beehive?
Well, a bee swarm.
Yeah, a bee swarm.
Yeah. So May is when you get bee swarms, and you can get 10, 20, 30,000 bees all flying together looking for a new home. And it's in May when they set off, and you can see them flying over your garden at this time of year, or you might see them settling at a bus stop or outside a school. And the first thing is they stop and settle and just gather themselves, and then they will go again. So the best thing to do is just leave them alone. They are just gathering their energy before finding a new home, and more than likely it won't be in your garden. If you are concerned, the best thing is to find your local bee club, and they will take those bees away and give them a new home with pleasure. And there's an organisation called the British Beekeeping Association. You can look them up on Google. They would be delighted to take a swarm of bees away.
I recall being a child, and I used to have this climbing frame that had like monkey bars on one side, a scramble net, and then the main frame and the slide, and a big tent on top. Now, underneath was just enough room for me to park my go-kart and my next door neighbour to also park his go-kart. So we used to drive it round and we'd park them up, reverse park, obviously, into the underneath thing because we thought we could drive, and then playing in the tent, and we heard this buzzing sound. And all of a sudden we saw a swarm, and then the swarm disappeared, but the buzz remained, and they went up through a little vent at the side of the house, and they went into the attic, and then the beekeeper had to come. It was quite something to hear the swarm and then see them just go through this little thing and be like, right, they're there.
Well, that's a good memory, and there's an interesting fact. The noise has stayed with you all those years. The noise of a swarm is terrifying. It sounds like a jet engine. Yeah. It's incredible. But the crazy thing is, before a colony swarms, they eat all of their honey because they kind of take it with them in their stomachs, and they fly carrying all their honey. And it's a bit like having a big Sunday meal. They've eaten so much food, they're not going to sting you. In fact, with a swarm of bees, what I did one last week, you can actually scoop them up with your hands and they're not going to sting you. So the message for listeners today is, if you hear a swarm of bees, if you see a swarm of bees, don't panic. They will settle, they will go away, and while they may sound terrifying, they're probably not going to sting you.
On that note, how many times have you been stung?
as I said at the beginning, it's user error. So I do make lots of mistakes. I make lots of learning, and I am stung occasionally.
Right. If people want to get hold of your book, where can they get it from, and what's it called?
Thank you. It's called Be Wise, 12 Leadership Lessons from a Busy Beehive. It's available on Amazon and all online retailers. And there's a website called bewisebook.com, and that's where you can buy and find more information. And importantly, the whole project is to raise money for a charity. And the charity is called beesfordevelopment.org. And they do some amazing work to help families in developing countries to have a bee business to pay for their kids' education. It's a win-win all round. It's a brilliant organization.
That's incredible. Philip, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.